All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Welcome. Uh, Welcome to today's workshop by Grace Miller, where we will be learning the basics of producing voice, some vocal training exercises, and how to navigate insurance. My name is Arian Reed. My pronouns are he, they, and I am a board member of Trans Emotion and the program coordinator of Navigating Gender Together. This workshop is a fourth educational peer support session to be provided by this program, which is a program operated by Trans Emotion, which is a trans-led and trans-serving organization. Navigating Gender Together also offers free gender-affirming garments such as binders, binding tape, tuckwear, tucking tape, gaffs, packers, packer holders, shapewear, pocket bras, breast forms to people who live in the California Central Valley. This program also hosts support to trans folks in the form of these online peer support sessions like the one that you're in. And everything that this program is doing and will continue to do has been made possible by a grant from the California Department of Public Health, specifically their transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex unit. If you are interested in applying for a free gender affirming garment or subscribing to our email so you can be the first to know about future educational sessions like this one, please visit our website, transemotion.com. I will also include that link here in the chat. In just a second when I find this window. Okay, sorry, my computer just updated and now I can't see certain things the way I used to. All right, the link is now in the chat. And I have another link for you all, which I'm about to put into the chat. There it is. Okay. This session is just the fourth installation in an ongoing series of workshops and panel discussions facilitated by a trans person and intended for the trans community. Our guest speakers include trans people and also health professionals who specialize in our health. Please note that you will have the ongoing opportunity to ask questions. You can send your questions to me at any time in the chat, and I can voice them anonymously on your behalf. Or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can ask your question aloud. I also want to take this time to ask our audience for feedback. Please let us know how we did today by taking our brief survey. At the end of the survey, you'll have the option of providing an email so you can participate in our prize drawing for a $50 gift card. I'm putting a link in our survey, which actually I just did. So you should already see the link in the survey, the link in the chat. And please don't forget to take our survey by the end of the day. After today, the survey will close. So if you don't see that link, please let me know and I can put it in the chat again. But for right now, I want to introduce our workshop presenter, Grace Miller. Grace, pronouns are she, her, is a queer graduate student in speech language pathology who is pursuing specialization in gender affirming voice services, also known as voice training. Her master's thesis explores barriers to accessing gender-affirming voice services in the Central Valley. In this workshop, Grace will describe the basic components of producing voice, share some introductory exercises involved in voice training for both feminine and masculine speakers, and describe differences between stereotypically feminine and masculine language patterns, which can be incorporated into one's speech. She will also share what she has learned about where gender-affirming voice services are available, who provides them, and navigating insurance for those services. Welcome to the virtual stage, Grace Miller. We are honored to have you here with us. Are you ready to get going?
Yes, I am. Thank you for introducing me. And yeah, thank you to and Trans Emotion for having me. Um, Thank you everyone who is attending. And I'm excited to get started. So I'm going to share my screen. If you haven't already, I wanted to give everyone a minute to grab a straw. And if you could fill up a cup with like an inch of water. So like any straw will do. It doesn't really matter as long as it's not like a huge boba straw. So if you haven't already, if you have like an old Starbucks straw or something like that, that will work. Um, you don't necessarily need it to do it what we're gonna do. So if you don't have a straw, you're fine. But it we're gonna do some exercises with the straw. So if you haven't already, please feel free to grab that. Um, okay. So um we will cover some of these things. So we'll start with gender affirming voice services, what they entail, who provides them, a bit about vocal hygiene and kind of the basics of how voice is produced, and how a healthy voice is produced. We'll talk about some resonance and pitch strategies, for feminizing or masculinizing or androgenizing your voice. And then some different speech and language patterns that we see between, like stereotypically feminine and masculine speakers. And then a bit about like what I know about seeking services and navigating insurance. Um, I was wondering if you guys could put in the chat, if there's anything specific that you would like us to talk about today, or to cover. This workshop, I tried to put like a little bit of everything that I thought people might want to know. So if they're like, I would like to know what people are the most interested in, so I know what to spend more time on. So if there's any specific questions or topics, feel free to put them in the chat. You can also unmute if you'd like.
Just a reminder, if you would like to unmute, just raise your hand and I will unmute you.
And then I'll just give everyone a minute if you want to leave something in the chat to do that, or if you want to go grab a straw, feel free.
So just a reminder, if there's anything you want to learn about today, please put it in the chat. Or just let us know what you came here to learn. If there's anything you're interested in. Are you here to learn how to masculinize your voice, feminize your voice, androgynize your voice? One person wrote, I would love help with throat contraction while speaking. Someone else said vocal strain when speaking for a long time or raising your voice or shouting. Someone else said, I'd love help with androgenizing my voice.
Okay, awesome. Feel free to continue to put things in the chat, especially if you think of them. And I'll try to pause consistently too to check in about questions as we go through it. But thank you for sharing that. All of those things are things that I will cover today. And so it's it's helpful to see, what people want to focus
And someone
on.
else said that they would like to deepen or androgynize their voice without HRT.
Mhm, for sure. Yeah, yeah, all of this we will discuss. Okay. So to start, just a little bit about me. So I'm Grace. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a graduate student in speech language pathology. You've probably heard of speech language pathologists, or I'll call us SLPs, in the schools. There's about half of SLPs work in the schools, and they do like articulation and like things that you maybe you've received speech services as a kid or know people who have. Um, the other half about of SLPs work more in the medical field, and so we deal with things like cognitive rehab, language, like regaining language after a stroke or using like an alternative communication device, swallowing, and then also voice, as well as like nonverbal aspects of communication. Um, So I lean more in the medical side. I'm planning to work in the medical side. I'm currently doing my medical internship where we mostly work on voice and swallowing. So I've done a lot of voice therapy this summer. Um, and this is part of the reason why gender affirming voice services or vocal training falls under like the umbrella of the services that SLPs provide. Um, I am still a student. I'm a graduate student and I'll graduate in December and be able to start working and like be licensed. But I am still learning. Um, you probably won't be surprised to know that SLPs don't get a whole lot of training on gender affirming voice services. So I've been doing a lot of work to try to learn more, and I am planning to specialize in these services and provide them once I've graduated, and continue to get more training on them. Um, and then my thesis is on barriers to accessing gender affirming voice services in the Central Valley. Maybe some of you took that survey or know someone who did. So I'll talk a little bit about what we found in my survey. And then, so yeah, I'm a student at Fresno State. I also host or help organize queer line dancing events. So you might know me from there, or I might know you from there. And then I just want to say, I'm a student, I'm still learning, take what's relevant and helpful, and then leave like what isn't. So yeah. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about gender affirming voice services and options for gender affirming voice services. So they're also known as voice training or gender affirming voice therapy. It like goes by a lot of names, but basically we're talking about feminizing, masculinizing, or androgenizing your voice. And it's of course based on each person's individual idea, right, of what that means to them. And so as we go through the workshop, you can kind of play with these different elements of voice and figure out what feels really right and authentic for you. And so these services focus on pitch. We usually think about pitch first when we're thinking about like a more masculine or feminine voice. But actually, a really huge component is also resonance, which is how your voice comes up out of your vocal cords and then resonates. We'll talk about that more later. Um, and then other things that you might work on in like a gender affirming voice therapy session would be articulation, different speech patterns like intonation, body language, um, that like nonverbal communication as well. And then who provides gender affirming voice services? Speech language pathologists do. SLPs will be more medically trained, and there's a chance that these services could be covered by your insurance. Whereas voice coaches and voice professionals also provide these services. And voice coaches tend to be more trained in like singing and acting and like professional voice use. But there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of voice coaches know a lot about the voice and the medical aspects as well. And a lot of SLPs who specialize in voice services know a lot about singing and things like that. Um, so those are who provides the services.
Grace, I want to pause you for just a second. Someone asked, what does medical training for swallowing mean?
Oh, so if I go back. So sometimes after a stroke or sometimes even after like a neck surgery, sometimes nerves can be damaged that affect your ability to swallow. Or if you have like a muscle disorder, you'll have trouble swallowing. And so SLPs help to train people in different exercises or strategies that help them to have a safer swallow. Um, so I do a lot of scoping at my work, and we put a little camera down people's nose. We have them eat and drink, and then you can see if food or drink is getting into their airway. And then we teach them these strategies to protect their airway and make sure food doesn't get stuck in their throat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I could ramble about it all day. It's very interesting.
Well, speaking about talking about all day, someone else said that they would appreciate advice for how fellow SLP graduate students can advocate for gender-affirming voice and how to get started with offering support in the community. Would you like me to give them your email or,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah?
go for it.
Okay,
I'll share my email at the end too, and at the end I'll stay for questions. Yeah, I will end up rambling for a long time if we talk about that. So let's touch base at the end to whoever shared that.
that's what I
Um,
figured.
okay, and then thank you for pausing me. Please leave questions or comments in the chat, and we'll continue to check in. Okay. And then let me know if I'm going too fast. I'm trying to not like ramble and for this to be like super long. Because I know a lot of you are here for the like actual exercises, and so I want to spend a good amount of time on that while also just getting a good kind of coverage for some things I think people might want to know. Um, so a little like really brief introduction to what surgical options look like for voice. For feminizing voice surgery, there are a couple different surgeries that will affect the voice. The first one's called anterior glottic web surgery. That's where they kind of fuse part of your vocal cords together so that you only have a smaller portion of your vocal cords that vibrate, which creates a higher pitch sound. Um, and that one is very effective at raising pitch, but you lose some of your ability to be loud and some of your vocal range with that one. The other one is called a cricothyroid approximation. And that one, it tenses your vocal cords, which creates a higher pitch sound. Um, Also effective at raising pitch. But that one, there's also some trade-offs with loudness and range, and the effects tend to wear off after about a year or two. But it's very different for different people, like how these surgeries end up, how effective they are. There's also a tracheal shave, which basically shaves down the Adam's apple, but that one has no effect on voice. It's purely cosmetic. And then masculinizing surgery options, it's called a thyroplasty type 3, and that causes the vocal cords to be less tense, which creates a lower sound. We'll look at vocal cords later and it'll make a little more sense. Um, and that one's very effective and long lasting at lowering the voice. Um, any options though, if you are interested in voice surgery, you would require voice therapy as well. You'll have to go through a period of complete vocal rest, like no talking, no whispering, after a surgery like this, and get support from an SLP, and then also work with the changes in your vocal cords so that you use your voice safely after a surgery. Um, and then the results are kind of variable, it seems like, across different people and different studies of how effective surgery are versus just voice therapy alone. So, like, one study found an increase in 63 hertz in pitch with voice therapy alone, and then another one found a really similar amount of increase in pitch for trans women with voice therapy and surgery. So there's a little bit of a higher increase in pitch with the voice therapy plus surgery, but it was pretty similar with voice therapy alone. So again, these effects are different for different people, but it's maybe promising to hear, I hope, that like therapy alone can be really effective at changing pitch. Any questions? Just want to make pause. Anything I'm missing? Okay. So what would they entail if you were working with an SLP? They're usually 30 to 45-minute sessions once or twice a week for 10 to 12 weeks. A more intensive schedule could be like 3 times a week for 4 weeks if you want to like get it done quick. But it really depends on your SLP, your preferences, and also how your insurance is working with covering services. Um, and then you'd have to have daily practice at least twice a day. And then you'd integrate the voice that you're working on in the sessions into your daily life gradually. Um, so voice services, like voice therapy is pretty like intense. It takes a lot of time and effort, um, especially if you want like a really big change to your voice. So it's definitely not a quick fix and it takes a lot of work and you have to think about using your voice when you start, which is can be exhausting, because we're so used to just speaking automatically. Um, but they can be very effective. And I know people who have received services from SLPs or voice professionals and felt really happy with the changes that they've made. I've also know people who are really happy with changes they've made on their own just by like learning things online. So it's really different for everybody. But voice services are kind of like they take a lot of work. Yeah. Okay, so now we'll get into a bit about anatomy and physiology of the voice. Um, so the kind of like intro to voice stuff might feel for some people you'd be like, I just want to get to the gender affirming exercises. But a lot of you are asking about like strain and fatigue and how to contract your voice, things like that. And so understanding the anatomy is going to be really helpful for when you're going to modify your voice, of understanding what's happening and how to take care of your voice so that you're not feeling so much strain when you're trying to, adjust your pitch or your resonance. So, how voice is produced, there's three major subsystems of our voice. There's respiration, so breathing, and this is really the foundation of our voice. We could not get our vocal cords to vibrate without air. So we take a breath in and then we push air up. We kind of squeeze our muscles very, very lightly around our vocal cords together. And then the vocal cords get sucked together by the air that's coming up. And that's what causes the vibration. And then the vibration of the vocal cords is called phonation, and that's the sound source for our voice. But if you were to take a recording of what the voice sounds like at the level of your vocal cords, it wouldn't sound like a human voice. What actually gives us all our own unique sound is how that sound then travels up and resonates in our mouth and our nose. And so for gender affirming voice therapy, for voice training, a lot of what we work on is resonance. We'll talk about pitch too, but resonance, and whether something's resonating in a more of a larger cavity is going to give us a deeper sound versus if it's resonating in a smaller cavity, like the nose, we're going to get like a lighter, brighter sound. It's going to appear more high pitch even without changing the pitch in your vocal cords at all. So we'll get there in a second. But first, I did want to show you guys what it looks like to create voice. I should say, I guess, trigger warning if you do not want to see what vocal cords look like. Sorry, I just flashed everybody with that. You can step away for a minute. Um, but this is what the inside of your throat looks like. Are we ready? Yeah, okay. If it will load. So these right here are your vocal cords, and they open when you breathe, and then they come together and vibrate when you talk, which we'll see in a second. Um, and when we're speaking, it's just the vocal cords that come together. We don't want to be squeezing these muscles that are around our vocal cords. These are really only used for swallowing or for coughing. But when we're speaking with a lot of strain, when we're really squeezing our vocal cords together, we end up using these muscles. They're called our false vocal cords. And that's part of what creates that strain and tension that people feel, and vocal fatigue. If you're feeling like you're really tired after talking all day, it's because you're having to engage these muscles that aren't really meant to be engaged to speak. Um, okay, this is what it looks like when you talk. They're coming together and they're vibrating. And this is really slowed down. We all speak at least 150 hertz, and hertz refers to the number of times your vocal cords vibrate in 1 second. So actually, the vibration is happening so fast we wouldn't be able to see it without a special light that we use for this that slows down the image for us to see how the vocal cords look. And then you're going to see how this person, their vocal cords get longer, and that's them increasing their pitch. They're going ee when they're doing this. So your vocal cords get longer and more tense when you're increasing your pitch. And then they're a little lower earlier on. This is, it's fine. Hopefully that made sense. Um, let me resume. So just to show you a picture of the vocal cords again. So yeah, so they're longer, they're more tense, and sometimes that is what creates strain, especially when we're trying to get to a higher pitch. But even a low pitch, we can end up with some strain when we're talking too. Okay, any questions so far?
The only question is about they're asking for advice and information on training and medical externship opportunities for fellow SLP graduate students on looking who are looking to learn gender affirming voice. Do you want me to send them your email?
Yeah, yes, and we'll chat more at the end. Okay, so if we end up forcing the vocal cords together too hard and speaking with too much strain, we can end up hurting ourselves. We can create these little hard nodules on our vocal cords, or these polyps, which are filled with like blood or fluid. So we're going to learn some like safe strategies for using the voice today, because we want to, when we're modifying our voice, be really careful about how we're doing it and in a way that's really easy on the vocal cords, because they're really tiny, delicate little guys. So we have to be careful with them. Um, and unfortunately, trans women are at like a higher risk of vocal cords, vocal nodules and polyps, um, which is one of the reasons why voice training is, medically necessary and really can be really helpful, for modifying your voice in a way that's not going to end up hurting you. Not to scare you, like you're probably gonna be fine. But these are the things that we're thinking about when we try to start with things like our straw, which we'll do in a minute, to be really safe with the vocal cords. Okay. And then just a little bit about voice changes on hormones. Oh yeah. Was there a question? You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. I just want to interrupt real quick just to let everyone know if you were looking away from the pictures, you can now look at the screen again.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Um, and sorry to anyone who saw vocal cords, but they did not want to see them. Um, okay, so a little bit about voice changes on hormones. So during puberty, if you have an estrogen-based puberty, your vocal cords are gonna get a little bit bigger, and your larynx is gonna drop a little bit, and that's gonna change. That's what's gonna give us a voice that doesn't sound so childlike. And then if you have a testosterone-based puberty, your vocal cords and your larynx is your voice box, are going to grow bigger, and then drop relatively lower in the throat. Um, some changes on HRT. So if you take estrogen, it increases hydration and blood flow to the vocal cords. So estrogen doesn't have a huge effect on pitch, but a lot of people report feeling like they have maybe like a lightness to their voice or more flexibility with their voice on estrogen. And then testosterone increases the size of the larynx and the vocal cords thicken. But the larynx, your voice drop box, it doesn't drop as low as it would during a testosterone-based puberty. And so that's part of the reason why sometimes when people start testosterone, they feel like their voice maybe can be unstable, can be hard to project their voice. Like it takes some time to like work with the changes to the voice, or why there can be some cracking and things like that, some vocal instability. Um, but again, some of the exercises we're going to work on today can help with regaining some range that is lost, and also playing with resonance so that you can have more masculine resonance and be lowering the larynx more like in your behavior. Um, so we'll get to that. Oh, sorry, let me go back. I'm gonna have the vocal cords, picture the vocal cords for the next two slides. So if you want to step away for a minute or look away, we'll let you know when to come back. Okay, so a bit about vocal hygiene. We want to hydrate, drink water. So vocal hygiene is just like, what are the best behaviors that you could be doing to protect your vocal cords? So we want to be drinking 64 to 84 ounces of water a day. That's about 8 to 10 cups. I know it's not always easy, but water's really important to keep the larynx, your vocal cords nice and hydrated. You want to get rest. So these are muscles, like any muscles, without rest, there's going to be more fatigue. And then you want to warm up your voice before singing or any heavy voice use. And we'll talk about some warm up exercises in a second. And then you want to make sure you rest your voice for parts of the day. If you use your voice a lot, maybe you're a singer, teacher, somebody who, yeah, uses your voice a lot, you want some periods of rest. And then other things, avoid irritants, smoking, vaping, secondhand smoke, caffeine, acidic foods, especially if you have acid reflux, can affect your voice. So, everything in moderation. Um, And then you want to avoid overdoing some of these other habits like coughing, throat clearing, yelling and shouting, and whispering. These are all things that really slam your vocal cords together in a way that's not the healthiest for them and can create those like nodules and polyps. And then, especially if you are working on changing your pitch, it's going to be even more you want to be even more careful with these behaviors, especially with coughing, yelling. And we'll talk about some strategies for resonance that will help us to be able to project our voice while changing the pitch, but in a way that's healthier and safer. Okay, now we can get into the actual exercises. So if you were looking away from the screen, we're no longer showing pictures of the vocal cords. And then any questions coming up? It's looking like no. Okay. So we want to start with breathing. So since breath is the foundation for all of our voice, we want to be practicing what is called abdominal breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, or belly breathing. And this is where the stomach goes out when you breathe in, and then it comes back in. It kind of naturally relaxes when you breathe out. And what this does is your diaphragm sits underneath your rib cage. And when you push the stomach down and out, you're going to pull the diaphragm down, which gives your lungs more room for air. Um, this is also very relaxing. It's the kind of breathing we want to use when we're exercising, if you want to fall asleep, and when you want to use your voice. So, if everyone wouldn't mind, what I'd like us to do is to put our hands on our stomach and practice trying to push the stomach out when you breathe in, and then let it naturally come back in and relax when you breathe out. So the stomach goes out and then in. We're just practicing breathing for a minute. Any comments or thoughts about that? If it felt weird or good? Is this the breathing gym? I don't know what the breathing gym is. Oh, is this the breathing gym? A little bit, maybe. Where we are practicing breath. Yeah. But if the breathing gym, you're talking about something specific. I don't know what that is. Yes, Maxine. Are you trying to unmute? I wonder if you can
You
manually.
should be able to unmute now.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Um, so on the breathe out, are we flexing the stomach in at all, or is it just a relaxation from the expansion from the first step?
Um, that's a good question.
Like, are we engaging our core?
You can, but you don't. It's more about relaxing it.
Okay.
And there is like that diaphragmatic control, especially once you start talking, you are engaging your stomach more when you're breathing out for sure. But it's not like super um like hard or forceful. Like it should feel nice and relaxed. Does that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. So yeah, there is a little bit of engaging the stomach muscles in, um, but it should feel relaxing. Um, so this can feel a little awkward to start, but if you want to practice changing your voice, then I would encourage you to try to practice this sort of breathing throughout the day whenever you get the chance. I find it's the easiest to do when you're laying down. So that's like a good place to start in the morning when you wake up or to fall asleep before you go to bed. Um, and then the more you practice it, the more natural it is. And this is what I tell like my voice patients all the time. Like this is like one of the exercises that we teach people to do at home. And then you really want to use this when we're practicing the voice exercises. So once we start doing some of these vocal exercises, or when you're practicing at home, you want to try to use abdominal breathing and maybe notice when you're clenching your stomach or holding your breath during the exercises or also throughout the day. The stomach can be a place where we carry a lot, right? And like hold a lot in. And we really want to practice breathing so that we're not trying to keep talking when we've run out of air, because that causes us to be really squeezing our vocal cords together in a way that can hurt them. So breath is going to help us to have our best voice, our healthiest voice. And also, if you want to be changing your range, the breath is going to facilitate that and make that easier. Okay, the next thing that we do are some stretches and then some massages. Um, these help to relax any tension that might be accruing in the throat. So there's actually a lot of muscles that are involved in voice, and both inside of your voice box and also outside your voice box. And then those muscles connect with the muscles in your jaw, all the way up your head and down your shoulders. Um, and so, because we're trying to reduce tension as much as possible, we want to practice some stretching a couple times a day. Um, and these also will help to bring some healthy blood flow to the area, which is going to make it easier for us to work with our voice. So you start by tilting your head to one side, and I invite you to join me.
And Grace, is it okay if people take screenshots of your slides?
Of course. And at
Okay.
the end, I have a handout that I'll share a link to that has a copy of the presentation. So you can download it and have that.
Oh, perfect.
Mhm. So yeah, tilt your head to one side and then the other. You hold for about 10 seconds And it's a great time to practice that diaphragmatic breathing, which is what we use in yoga. It helps us to stretch our muscles more. And then you're going to tuck your head into your chest. And then tilt your chin up. And you want to really jut up your chin so you feel a nice stretch along the throat. And then we do shoulder rolls, do forward and back. And then you're going to turn your head to one side and tuck your chin. So you should feel a good stretch on the other side of your neck. And then do that again to the other side, turn your head and then tuck your chin. Good. And then the next part, you'll do a little massage. So you start at the collarbone, and then you're going to push up to your temples, and then down, and then back behind the ears. And you just go back and forth like that. And it should feel good. If there's any pain, just don't do it. That should be a nice little massage. And then the next one, it's here in purple. You start again at your collarbones, and this time you start with little circles up your throat. All the way up to your chin. And then little circles around your jaw, all the way up to the joint. And you want to do each of these for like a minute. And then the last one you might already do, you just massage behind your shoulders and your neck. And yeah, you can always too go for any of these. You could just do the opposite side with the hand if it's a little awkward on the hands. And then yeah, just be gentle and careful with yourself if you have any pain, if you have any, neck problems, like proceed carefully, gently. Good. Any questions? Oh, and then Caro elaborate that the breathing gym is exercises like the breathing exercises done by musicians, and it's in a book. That makes sense. The yeah, diaphragmatic breath is used by singers a lot and by people who have to play instruments, like wind instruments, and actors. It really gives you the best airflow that you need and then control over your breathing too. Okay. So these, again, if you want to home practice, these are great to do once to twice a day, and especially before vocal exercises or at, when you get started in the morning and then at night, reducing any tension. Okay, so we're gonna start the exercises for the voice in a moment. As we play with these, think about what your authentic voice is, what sounds or feels really true to you. We want to minimize vocal fatigue. So here and also elsewhere, if you're seeking information online, you never want to be straining. You never really want to be focused on changes in the throat. So it shouldn't be painful or fatigable. If you are feeling that way, we're going to try some strategies to really try to minimize that as much as possible. So take breaks if you need to, and play with it to try to feel like it feels good. Like these should not be you shouldn't be pushing from here, like in the throat. Um, we're going to play with it to feel nice and relaxed. If you want to try these at home, give yourself time to practice these daily. A couple times a day, twice a day is really helpful. Um, and then as you are working on adjusting your pitch, or your voice, it's really nice to do this in contexts that are really playful and low stakes. So like singing in the car, reading out loud, doing silly voices. People I've talked to who have done intensive vocal training have talked about how helpful it is to just play with the voice and start to feel it out, in a way that's not like stressful or, like one of my interview participants was talking about how when she was practicing her vocal training, she would read out loud to her girlfriend over the phone, and different like comics and do silly voices. So just playing with this in a way that feels good and fun, can be really helpful. So, okay, we're going to start with our straw phonation, which is creating voice through a straw. Um, and when we use the straw, what it does is it creates this like occlusion to our vocal tract, which causes air to push back on our vocal cords. So not only are we getting breath coming up to vibrate the vocal cords, breath is being pushed back, which causes the vocal cords to vibrate really nice and easily. So if you want to increase your vocal range and start speaking at a higher or a lower pitch, starting with the straw is going to help you learn how to build the muscle memory to do that without tension and strain. It'll also help with like warming up your voice. So what we want to do, it's very fun and silly. We get a straw with some water. You don't really want it to be in a water bottle unless you take the lid off because you don't want there to be like too much force to it. It should be really easy. What you're gonna do is you're just gonna blow bubbles and make a little voice as you're blowing bubbles. So like you're a kid. And then take a breath. You don't want to breathe through the straw because you can't get as much air in. And then do it again. And you want to start at your most comfortable voice. So, like, just really easy. We're not changing our pitch at all yet. Just like the most easy voice, kind of the voice that you said, like, like what voice, what pitch would that be at? That's where we want to try to start. How is that going? How's that feeling? Any strain that you're feeling when you're doing this? Mm-mm. Okay, good. It should feel really relaxed, like literally no strain. And so when you feel comfortable with that, you're going to try to do it without the bubbles. So you can pull the straw out. So you could start with the bubbles and then pull the straw out of the water. And what we want is, maybe your straw's a little wet like mine, but what we want is to be feeling airflow coming out of the straw while we're producing voice. So we're still pushing the air out while we're adding the voice. Give it a try. Is that a little harder? Does it feel easy? Good. Okay. So again, trying it without the water. Nice and easy. And then if you're having trouble with that, if you feel like your voice gets kind of caught back in your throat when you pull the straw out of the water, you put it back in, and do it with the bubbles until you feel good. This is going to be so different for everyone. So some people, like, you're going to be like, this is super easy. I've got it. and not really need the water and maybe be able to even phase out the straw pretty fast. For some people, it's really like, especially if you're used to not breathing when you speak, it can be really hard to learn how to let that breath out when you're creating voice. And also changing your pitch with that like healthy voice use. Um, so when you feel like it's good, you can try some glides. You could do it in the water or outside. So you go like, woo, woo. So try that.
Grace, we have some questions in the chat. Um,
Let's do it.
Someone asked, I can't tell if I'm just humming. Um, Someone else suggested that uh air should be passing through the straw if you're not just humming.
Okay, great. These are great questions
And
or like
then
comments.
and then I have another one after you answer that one.
Yeah. So, okay. So the way that you know if you're humming or not is if the air is coming out of the straw. So if you're seeing bubbles, you're good. It's pretty similar to a hum, but the air isn't coming out of our nose at all. It should all be coming out of the mouth, and you should still see airflow. And you should also see the bubbles indicate the air. There's air and sound. That is what voice is a combination of air and sound. The idea of these is that we're getting really good use of air, which is helping our vocal cords vibrate more easily. So that when we start to adjust our pitch without the straw, we're still pushing the voice up and out, which is going to help us to have more control of our voice. Um, it might sound kind of abstract or also like you're not doing anything at first. But the more that you play with it, and if you're using this, if you're doing regular practice, the easier it is to start to feel how this is helping your voice, and helping the vocal cords to vibrate more easily without strain. Does the straw create a humidifying effect? Maybe a little bit. It's more so it's more so that the air is coming back onto the vocal cords. So the again, it's vibrating through airflow going both ways. Um, and then someone was saying it just felt too easy, so I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. It should feel super easy. And like that is the entire point, is that you're gonna, once you get to it and it's easy at this really comfortable pitch, we want it to be easy at a high or low pitch, whatever your targets are. And then that way you're learning how to use your voice now in the range that you want, but it's still going to feel nice and easy, and not be something that's so hard on your throat and like straining. Um, and then someone else said, strain when I go low because I don't resonate in my chest anymore. Um, so it should hopefully feel like when you go low, you're still pushing it out through the straw. So you definitely don't have to resonate in your chest to get a lower pitch. But the resonation, you're right, especially with this, is going to be a lot less in your chest because of how we're sending the voice out. Um, and then yeah, if it doesn't feel good because you're not resonating like, or you're not creating low tones, then it's something to, if you want to go low, to play with. Um, but where you feel the strain is like we want to like slowly work our way towards that spot if that is comfortable. If you don't want to speak in a low voice, then like you're good. You know, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Are we feeling good? Okay, good. Okay. So you can use these exercises to warm up your voice, to refresh it when it's getting tired. If you're like at the end of the day and your voice is really hoarse and you do these, it'll actually bring your voice back. It gets the vocal cords vibrating again really nicely. And then also to increase your range. So especially too if you've been on testosterone and you feel like you've lost some vocal range and you want to get some of it back, starting with the straw is a really good place to start to go, okay, I want to go higher. And so start to go higher with the straw. So you do your higher pitch with the, and you want to still be feeling airflow as you're going up or down, whatever your targets are. Um, and then you can also do these with music. So you can literally sing a song through the straw. You won't have consonants, but you can do like a and that's another really fun way to play with pitch. I have like an old Starbucks straw in my car, and I've been working on increasing my range so that I can teach other people how to do it. So I've been doing that in the car with songs, especially like songs where like I can't quite get that high note. If you try it with a straw, it helps to build again that muscle memory. So just like your vocal range, able to do it without the straw eventually. Any questions? How is that sounding or feeling so far?
We do have one question. Someone asked, are we trying to avoid falsetto when practicing a higher pitch?
So let me go to the next slide because I think I'm going to answer your question in the process. So when we're adjusting pitch, we want to start really slow. So you start again at that really easy pitch where you feel like you do a ah. And then once that feels good, you want to increase or decrease your pitch just a little bit at a time. So you aren't going straight into falsetto. If you're trying to increase your range, you're not going to go, okay, I'm going to go to 220 immediately. And I'm going to go like, um, but you play with it a little bit, and then you can also glide all the way up to your highest note. What you're practicing is getting to be able to do that while still seeing bubbles or feeling airflow. And that's what's going to be difficult if you're shooting for that higher pitch. And then same thing, if you're shooting for a lower pitch, um, then it's probably going to be hard to maintain that airflow and go all the way down while still or to like go all the way down while still seeing bubbles or feeling air coming out of the straw. That's really the point of the straw exercises is to help you get to whatever your target is. But you can play with the glides, and what you're playing with is going up or down, all the way up to your highest or all the way down to your lowest without strain. Um, so that's just for the glides. You're going, and you can feel that out. And then if you're trying to practice at home, increasing or decreasing your pitch, you want to go up by, we would say 10 hertz or one semitone if you know about music at a time. Um, for some people, numbers will be really helpful, and you can use it's called the Voice Tools app, and they have you're able to measure your pitch on there, so you can watch it and see where you're at, and then practice increasing or decreasing your pitch. And again, you can do that with the straw, and then once you feel like it's good with the straw and there's no strain, then just start to speak with that pitch that you're targeting. You also don't have to worry about numbers. You could also just think about, okay, I'm trying to go up or down a little bit at a time without it feeling, again, like it's straining. And then if you are interested in like looking at what the pitches are that you might want to target, so the cis female range is usually around 180 to 220 hertz. Ambiguous range is 145 to 175 hertz. And then the cis male range is about 100 to 140. So for voice training, for feminine speakers, we usually shoot for over 180 and then under 130 for masculine speakers. But again, this will be different for everybody, and like how you want to sound, and like what it is that you're targeting. And then the other thing to think about when you're trying to, if you're trying to speak higher or lower, is that we don't all talk at one pitch all the time. So like the goal isn't, I want to be at 220 all of the time, because that would be really monotone. And we have a lot of fluctuation in our voice. So it's really a range, and you want to start at like a comfortable range. So say you want to speak closer to the cis female range, you might actually be shooting for 180 and then going up a little bit higher when you're adding intonation. And then you can go down um when you're adding the low intonation. So yeah, just playing with that range. Okay, any questions so far?
Did we answer your question about avoiding falsetto?
Yes.
Because the question was, are we trying to avoid falsetto while practicing the higher pitch?
And it's definitely not at all when you're doing the glides, go up as high as you can and practice that. But if you're trying to speak, like if you're just targeting one tone continuously, you don't want to start at your falsetto. You want to slowly increase. And then someone else said, maybe we'll talk about this, but I struggle to express excited emotions when I am intentionally using a lower pitch. Like I can say I love you in a lower pitch, but I feel like I sound bored. Um, okay, yeah, my thoughts on this initially, and you can tell me if this is helpful or not, is that you want to think about the intonation in I love you. Um, and seeing what you could even again be looking at like a pitch app while you do this if you want to play with, well, what is the intonation that we want to have? Because you are going to go up. You're not always going to be like super low, especially if you're trying to like really emphasize something. Um, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question? Let's play with it a little bit. And we'll play with some resonance too. And then after that, we'll come back to it if we can. And you can let me know. Okay. So you want to start with the straw, and then I want you to just go up a little bit higher. So start at your easy voice and then just go a little bit higher or lower than where you normally are. And then once you've got a good thing going, you're feeling airflow in the straw while you're at your higher or lower pitch, just a little bit. You can take it out and try to say a phrase. So say, how are you? 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 How is this sounding or feeling? And then again, you can practice this at home as you're increasing or decreasing your pitch of practicing with the straw and then the phrases. And the idea is we start with the straw because we want to feel that new pitch, but have it feel really easy. And then just right into our voice, be maintaining all the same placement, all the same just easy speaking practices. Okay, I hope this is resonating and makes sense. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk now about resonance. So we again usually think about pitch when we're thinking about a masculine or feminine speaking voice. But pitch only fundamental frequency refers to your like average pitch. That only accounts for in studies they found about 42% of how people perceive a listener as being masculine or feminine. A good 20 to 25% is how the voice resonates, which we'll play with in a minute. 15 to 20% is like our intonation pattern. Are we going up at the end of our utterances, or are we going down at the end of our utterances? And then there's some other features that we'll look at too. So for a more feminine resonance, what we want is to bring the voice forward. We want to feel resonance up in our mask, a little bit nasal sometimes to start because this is going to be a smaller cavity to resonate in. And then for a more masculine resonance, we want to feel the voice more back here. We want more space for the voice to like bounce around and resonate. And that's going to create the illusion of a deeper sound versus it's going to sound brighter and lighter. It'll seem like it's a higher pitch if we're speaking more up here than if we are back here. Um, the trick, though, is to make sure you're not trying to make these changes at the level of your voice, of your vocal cords. So it's not in the throat. It's never in the throat that the changes are happening. It's up here. So we're always thinking we're pushing the voice up and out, just like we were just doing with the straw, where it's not down here. We're not going into like fry, especially like if you're trying a more masculine resonance, you might be used to like trying to speak like with more glottal fry, or even more feminine. Sometimes we'll do fry. We don't want that. We want the voice coming out. We need to be taking a good breath. And so for feminine resonance, we can try to get our voice up here with an M sound and then be thinking and do like a me. So a me, 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 me. If you want to try that, go for it. Me, 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 me. Feeling vibrations in the lips. Me, 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 me. And then so the voice is resonating into your mask. So you might feel it in your nose and your lips, like right here. For more masculine resonance, we want to feel it more in the back of the mouth. And this also is going to lower our larynx a little bit when we talk, which again gives more resonance to our voice. So I want you to plug your nose and say, I have a cold. I have a cold. I have a cold. I have a cold. But we're not going into glottal fry, so we're not, or vocal fry, so we're not, it's not where I have a cold. The voice is still coming out, but it's not coming up through the nose. I have a cold. I have a cold. And you could even try to yawn a little bit. And feel how the voice is resonating more back here. And so it's not getting stuck in the throat. It's still, the voice is coming out, but it's resonating up here. And then we can try, and then we don't want it to be nasal at all, because again, our nose is a smaller resonating cavity. So if we want a deeper sound, we need the voice back here. So you can try a g, g, g. Still pushing the breath out. We're still breathing. G, g, g. But we feel it back here. And then to contrast, if you feel comfortable, try a me, 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 me. G, g, g. How is this feeling? Are you feeling how like that feels and maybe sounds different, even at the same pitch, right? If I go me, 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 ga, 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 I'm not changing my pitch at all, but it sounds lighter and brighter up here versus back here. Any questions so far? Okay. Resonance often, it's really where the magic happens. And then we're going to add some, we'll start to eventually play with pitch in addition to resonance, which is going to create like an even more dramatic effect to the voice. Okay. So what we want, so then this is going to just expand on what we just did. But again, we want to think about either resonating or back here. For a more feminine resonance, we practice lip spreading and bringing the tongue forward. And what this is going to do is it makes our vocal tract smaller. So there's only a smaller space to resonate in, which is going to create that lighter sound. Whereas for a more masculine resonance, when we're talking, we want more of a quality to our speech, where the voice, we're lowering the jaw, which is, again, giving us more room for resonance, and we're bringing the tongue back. So the resonance is happening back here. So there's, again, more of a quality to our speech. Uh, uh, uh. And then we're going to try this with some words. So the idea is that for more feminine resonance, we want an equality to our speech. So we want to be bringing the tongue forward and spreading the lips. We're going to start this very exaggerated. You're not going to be talking like this all the time, or talking like this all the time. But we want to start more exaggerated so we get that feel for it. And so we want for a feminine resonance an E quality to the words. So you would start with the E Monday, E Tuesday, again, sending the voice up and out. And then for a more masculine resonance, we want more of a quality to our speech. So a Monday, a Tuesday. So practice this. You could try both and see how they feel, or stick with what your target is. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but not getting caught in the throat. No fry. Uh, Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. How's that feeling? Kind of silly. But or is it feeling like, can you feel how that feels different or like sounds different? With feminine
Weird.
resonance, okay, weird. Yes, definitely weird. With feminine resonance, I'm afraid I'll look like I'm constantly smiling. Yeah, we probably don't want to look like the Joker all of the time, or be smiling all the time. Again, we start really exaggerated, and then as it becomes an easy muscle memory, it's something that you can pull out as you're speaking. So you can kind of choose what sounds or what parts of the thing that you're saying that you want to add that smile to. Um, and it might be especially helpful for certain sounds that tend to maybe fall back in the throat when you're trying to bring it up. Um, and then also some of it's about where your tongue is placed too, right? Which isn't where people can see it. Um, I think I have some videos too, usually before this. Um, there's this link here. And again, all of this is in a handout I'll give you guys later, that does a good job of showing how to do the lip spreading. And then she shows how to do it in a more natural way. Um, yeah, I hope that that answers the question or eases some anxiety. As it starts to like become more natural, again, it's just not going to be so exaggerated. Okay. So we can practice this with some phrases. So, you can always start with a hum for the feminine resonance to try again to feel our voice up, really up here. Like we're not really feeling it in the back of our mouth. So you can start like kind of bring it up with a me, 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 me. Once you feel like you've got the voice up here a bit more, you can try like a me. How are you? How are you? And you can see how I'm not necessarily, you don't even necessarily be like, how are you? But like you're still able to bring it up. And then for a more masculine resonance, you can try again yawning, feeling the back, everything relaxed, feeling your larynx lower. And that quality. How are you? Uh, nice to see you today. I love you. Uh, see you later. More of a can you text me? I'm going home. So you can play with that and practice that. I encourage you to give it a try. Like, are you going to the store? Uh, are you going to the store? Coffee, please. Uh, coffee, please. And then we'll talk about this later, but women tend to have more range when they're speaking. There's more of a fluctuation of pitch, and men tend to be a bit more monotone. But again, this is where like you play around with what feels right to you. Because maybe you want a more masculine sound, but like you don't want to sound monotone. So like you can play with like what feels right to you. Um, and yeah. Okay, any questions about this? Okay. It definitely like is weird. A lot of what we do in speech therapy in general is weird, but especially the voice. And so you definitely aren't alone if you're like, what am I doing? And it's kind of weird in that like it starts with like it doesn't maybe feel like it's doing very much, or it seems really exaggerated. But as you start to generalize it and practice it daily, it becomes part of how you talk. So the type of voice therapy I do every day is resonant voice therapy, which is all about speaking into your mask. And I notice that I just do it all the time now. And so it just like by doing the therapy a couple times a day with patients. So it's pretty cool. But it's very silly. And then a little bit about speech patterns. So, like we were talking about, another part of how we perceive people's voices as being masculine or feminine has to do with our pitch and how we use it. So, with feminine speech, there tends to be a greater variability in pitch, whereas masculine speech tends to be more monotone. Feminine speech, we tend to go up at the end of our utterances. So it kind of maybe always sounds a little bit like you're asking a question. And that really invites the listener in to add what they think. Whereas masculine utterances the pitch tends to go down at the end of your sentence. So it's more, I guess, like authoritative. Like you're like, this is what I have to say. Um, Women tend to speak a little bit more softly. Men tend to speak a little bit more loudly. Women tend to have more precise articulation, whereas men, it's a little more relaxed. I don't know if you guys have seen, there's this comedian who does like her impression of straight men, and it's like it's like that like they just don't even really articulate what they're saying at all. Like it's like sounds like that. But men's speeches tend to be a little bit more monotone, and less articulated. And then women tend to have more breathiness in some of their like sometimes when they're talking. Um, but again, all of this is cultural too, right? So like different cultures have different patterns with these things. And then they vary a lot based on each individual person. So so yeah, so it really is about what feels good and right to you. But it's these are some things that you could play with as you're training your voice. And then another part is body language. So again, take it or leave it. But women tend to sit more forward, it's more inviting body language. Men tend to sit back. It's more relaxed. Women tend to walk with a shorter stride. Men tend to walk with a longer stride. Women tend to have more small, flowy hand gestures, whereas men tend to be more large and stiff. Women tend to have more smiling and nodding. Men tend to have more neutral facial expressions. Women tend to have more fleeting eye contact, and men tend to have more sustained eye contact. And then women tend to stand close together, and men tend to stand far apart from one another.
We do have one question. Someone asked if you could share more about the components of androgynous speech patterns, and does this vary by individual preference?
Yeah, it really does. And most of the studies that have been done have focused some of the problem with the voice literature and like research has been like there's this assumption that everybody is transitioning like to man or woman and that the goal for their voice or their speech is like to pass. That's obviously not true for everybody. But because there's not a lot of literature that like really has a good understanding of gender, we don't have a lot about like what would be perceived as androgynous. If we're thinking about pitch, we do have this more ambiguous range that you could be focusing on. And then when it comes to resonance, and then also some of these speech patterns and body language patterns, it really is about like what feels right to you. And you can even like kind of take a look at these things and play with them and think if like for you the idea for androgynous is like you're somewhere kind of in the middle, you can play around, right, with like incorporating a little bit of both of these things. Um, and also it helps to watch people too, like people in your life or in movies and TV and think about um, yeah, how you want to like look or sound. And then yeah, like what seems more androgynous to you. But kind of like with everything, and even if you're not like the goal isn't androgyny, again, like what these things mean is going to be different for everybody. Hopefully that's helpful. Mhm. And yeah, please keep the questions coming. We're almost done here, actually, and then I can answer any more questions. Um, so what services look like that I know of? There are some online services that are not with SLPs, but with voice professionals. There's the Seattle Voice Lab. I know one person who went to the Seattle Voice Lab and she really liked it. And the sessions are around $100 to $200 per session. They're online. Seattle Voice Lab has a lot of trans and non-binary voice coaches too. Um, and then another one I've heard of is Undead Voice. I don't know anyone who's taken anything beyond the free introduction class, and she had liked it. Um, but but yeah, I'm not sure how much they cost beyond that. But again, I have like links to this in the packets, and you can like look into it. But Seattle Voice Lab is like very well known for what they do, and very like they're like very much medically trained. Like their training is one that SLPs can use for gender affirming voice.
Grace, we do have one question. Someone asked, can you describe the masculine speech pattern for asking a question? They said, I feel like there is something else happening besides the voice going up, as a more feminine pattern would be.
Yeah, so in general, when we ask questions, it is true that our pitch goes up at the end of a question. For a more masculine pattern of asking a question, it would maybe just not go up quite as much. Um, and then you have to think too when you're playing with pitch about what your range is. So you might start a question at your lowest end of the masculine pitch range and then end it on a higher end of still like a masculine range, but you're still going up. Um, does that help? I'm not sure what else might be going on with resonance there. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know if I can fully answer your question. And then Ari, is that how you say your name? Ari, I should have asked you earlier. Yes. Okay. And then Ari was saying that he records voices or audios of himself and then plays them back when his voice is in the range he wants it to be. Or if I train it more in certain ways to reach the gender range I want. Maybe also think about where you're placing emphasis in the question. I think that that's really helpful. And yeah, because your voice sounds different in your head, it is really helpful to record yourself too, and use that as well. Any other questions? I didn't mean to rush through this. It does seem like there are a lot of questions about like this kind of resonance and then also these speech patterns.
We do have one more question. Someone asked, I'm curious, where would the emphasis be in regards to speaking aloud a question?
In a question, it is usually on It's usually at the end and or on the thing that you have a question about. Um,
So like the
so
who or the what, the where.
yeah, so like I could say like you're wearing a blue hat, you're wearing a blue hat, you're wearing a blue hat. Like all of those are different questions, right? Based on where the emphasis is on, and then that stress is usually maybe said a little bit louder, maybe at a little bit of a higher pitch. But usually we go up still a little bit at the end.
We have another question. Someone said they've seen online videos where you can contract the back of your throat to increase pitch, and they would like any tips on that you may have.
Could you say a little bit more about what you mean by contract the back of your throat? The apps that record are great too. Yeah. We'll give them a minute.
In the tonsil area.
Tonsil area. I would say I would really have to like look at the video to know exactly what they're saying. Usually we would really say you don't want to be contracting your throat to change your pitch. And this is where the straw is helpful, where like you're trying to go up and you want to let the straw do the work of like it's not the effort isn't coming from the throat. Um, Again, maybe I'd have to see it to like get a sense because maybe they are giving you some good advice, but you want to be really careful about that we're increasing the pitch, but we're doing it in a way that's more a little bit more about the airflow and less actually about changing your vocal cords. Um, you also you are lifting your larynx a little bit to increase a higher pitch. So that might also be what they're talking about. But again, if you're just thinking about resonating forward, with a hum in the nose, that's going to naturally lift your larynx up to create a higher sound. Um, but again, in a way that's not about contracting in the throat. Because yeah, we really don't want the emphasis to be on the throat because we end up with that strain and that tension there. I hope that that's helpful. Please feel free to ask more questions too if you have them. Anything else? Okay, feel free to keep leaving them in the chat. Again, we're almost done, so we can chat more too at the end. So this was it for body language. We got any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. And then so if you want services, non-SLP services, Seattle Voice Lab, very, very well known and recommended. There's Undead Voice as well, which has a free intro class, and also like a free packet, which I included the link on the handout we'll look at. The SLPs I know about in Fresno who provide these services, there's Debbie Moore who provides them through Kaiser. And then where I am doing my externship, it's with Malin McCarty, and she's at Demera Allergy. And she takes most major insurances there. So those are the SLPs and then the non-SLP resources that I know of, and I haven't heard anything bad about. So I wanted to share those. And then a bit about navigating referrals and insurance. For insurance, you can't just directly go to a speech pathologist. You'll need a referral from your doctor. So you could go to your doctor and say, like, maybe you have Kaiser. You're like, hey, I know this SLP provides these services. Will you please refer me to her for them? Or whoever, if you do know of someone. You can also ask your doctor, or like an ear, nose, and throat doctor might know too, if they know any SLPs that they work with and can see if they provide these services. And insurance really depends on whether your insurance covers voice therapy in general. This is what I've heard from one SLP. So other SLPs might have a different understanding of how billing works for these services. But from what I have been told is if you're using your voice, you're changing your pitch and you're doing it in a way that's like has strain, which like for the most part, if you're doing it without support, that's what's going to happen. We would call that a functional voice disorder. So it's not even necessarily, from what I understand, billed as gender affirming voice therapy, um, which is helpful for insurance purposes. That it is more about if your insurance covers voice therapy in general, and not necessarily does it cover gender affirming voice therapy. That's more of a secondary diagnosis that we would use for the services. Um, that's what I have been told so far. But these are all things I'm still learning about with insurance. Um, and then for voice coaches, you don't need a referral, but they might not be medically trained and they wouldn't be covered by your insurance. I'm gonna check in. Any questions about that? Oh, and then Casey said that they had Debbie Moore as a professor and that she's awesome. Yeah, I know one person who has had gender affirming voice services from Debbie Moore, and she had a good experience and felt like she like got the voice changes that she wanted. So yeah. And then Maylin is who I work with, and she's very, very nice. And then I will hopefully be providing these services soon as well. And I'll be in touch with Trans Emotion too to be able to, yeah, share that. And then a little bit on my findings from my research in the Valley. From my interviews with trans and non-binary people from the Central Valley, there's not a lot of in-person options that people know of. There's kind of a general lack of knowledge about services. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers to accessing them is like people just don't know what they are or where to go. Um, and then another big problem is that SLPs aren't well connected with the community. So even though I had about 5 SLPs say that on my survey to the SLPs that they currently provide gender affirming voice services, it is my feeling that, and I think the feeling of a lot of the people I interviewed too, that SLPs aren't well connected to the trans community locally. And so there needs to be more to be done to like bridge that gap. And then not all SLPs are very well trained in gender affirming voice therapy or voice therapy in general. Voice is a little bit more of a niche in our field, just in general. But SLPs in the Valley are also mostly positive, but not very knowledgeable about working with trans and non-binary people. But there are still, some who provide these services and yeah. Okay, and then we'll look at the handout. I was just gonna check the chat if there are any questions.
I
Are
haven't
you
seen any
sure?
questions in the chat. I did put a link to a trans-owned company that does various types of voice-based lessons, so like singing lessons, gender-affirming lessons, things like that. I think this is the company I worked with that has been changing names, but they are trans-owned and they employ people who are LGBTQ. So I spent a year working with a gay man in Seattle on how to sing after transitioning.
That's awesome. Yeah, and then if any of you know of services and want to share, please leave them in the chat, and I can add them to my resources as well. Okay, so a little bit about home practice. Again, pay attention to start kind of reflecting on how you want your voice to sound, what voices you like, recording yourself if you feel comfortable, and like listening to how you do sound. Um, the straw phonation is really helpful for warming up and cooling down your voice, for when your voice fatigues, and then what to get into the target pitch range that you're looking for. And then resonance practice, you can try with some different sample phrases that I've included. Um, okay, and then Katie said that them and Haley are both SLPs with Simpson Speech and Language Services in Fresno and are gladly accepting new clients. So that is really helpful. My survey to SLPs that found that there were a few people who provided these services was anonymous. So like I haven't been able to track who they are. So it's really nice that there are SLPs here and we can add them to the list that we have here. And then Katie, could you put you and Haley's full names here? And I'm going to add them to the handout. Okay. So this is a little handout. Yes, MACCCS. Awesome. Okay. That's a little bit the handout that I have here. The link is, let me put it in the chat. I just put the link in the chat. And so what we have, I have a copy of our slides from this presentation, so you can use that, like the slides are always here. And then some home practice resources. I have a voice handout. I stole these from the SLP that I work with. And that has information on voice treatment, vocal hygiene, abdominal breathing, some more detailed exercises or instructions, neck stretches and massage, straw phonation, and yeah. And then for there's some other resources here on the more feminine resonance. There's some videos that you can try. And then same thing for if you're going for more masculine voice and resonance. And then there's also some practice phrases. So if you're trying to practice either your resonance or your pitch or a little bit of both, you can do that with you could start at like 2 syllables, then 3, and then practice these like longer and longer sentences and phrases. And then there's some links to some other videos and resources. This was how the vocal cords looked. We have before and after voice training for feminine voice therapy if you wanted to hear that. And then some free resource guides that I found online. And then the who I know of who provides these services. Okay. And that's the end. Are there any questions?